Welcome to Season 2 of RecLess, the podcast making you smarter and more knowledgeable about the field of parks and recreation. Join hosts Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country as they dive into the world of parks and recreation with a surprise guest each episode. Laughs, leadership, life. This is RecLess.
Speaking of, if we had a better HR department, by the way, here at the RecLess podcast, Tom would be serving a 1-game suspension. Jay, did you see the text where he said, I asked if anyone had a hard out, and he said he had a hard in?
Yes, I did.
That
We've
is
never
an
had a
HR
hard in before.
violation. That is
What?
is sexual in nature.
We've
I
had
had
a
a-
lot of hard outs. We've never had a hard in.
That is
before.
crazy.
I had a better one. I don't know who our guest
Welcome
is.
to
so
RecLess.
I don't know
This
how
is Shane
appropriate
Mize.
this is.
I did a cold in, caught Tom talking. My name is Shane Mize. I got my two buddies, Jay and Tom here. Jay, Tom, how y'all doing today?
I'm doing great, I guess.
I'm good. I didn't know we were starting.
I guess this is the show.
This is how we do it. Get a little reckless, fellas. I'm excited to talk to y'all with our guest today. They have an interesting perspective, I think, on some things that I think will create some good conversation. But before I get started, as we normally do, I have a question for the group. I was talking to my assistant director, Jeff, recently. Not Jay. I was wishing
wouldn't
Jay
hire
would
me.
have applied. Yeah, I would hire you just so I could scream at you.
I thought about applying. Now, when that posted, I really wanted to apply just to see if I would get an interview and then just to see what that interview process would look like.
If I would treat you any differently than I do when you send me emails about shirts.
Well, and when you did post this job, it posted for like $300,000 salary. So I was like, okay, I'm in.
Incredible,
Yeah,
right?
you probably would have flew us in, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We could have done this in person. But I was talking to Jeff, my AD, and Jeff has recently come on board. And the question for y'all is what came up from the conversation I was having with Jeff in some ways, which is, and this is tough, right? It's tough to evaluate something when you're standing on top of it. And this is definitely the case for this. The question is, what is the perception of you in the industry? And not the perception of you from our YPN family or someone that's worked with you, but you probably have a decent idea of what the perception of you is in our industry. And then when they get into your agency, folks that actually come and work for you, does that hold up or is it drastically different?
It's a great question. I think about that often lately, actually. So
I've never thought about it.
I have because, and Jay, it relates to you and I did a session for Maryland, right? And all of the sessions, so I'll answer my question by talking about these sessions. A lot of what I maybe speak about or present about have to do with culture. Okay, culture I think will hold with anybody who comes into our agency because that's something that's very, very I think it's in your face, right? If you're someone who focuses on culture and you really believe in it, you're going to probably live it. And I like to think that I do. But on the flip side of it, I believe that people from maybe around the profession see someone like myself as an individual who pushes the profession, who promotes it, who heavily supports professional development for not only myself, for not only those that we interact with, but my team. And so then that comes into play that you have an individual who might have taken some, in myself, who has taken some leadership roles, whether it was a state level, local level, conference, board, doesn't really matter, but some leadership opportunities in some of the organizations. We spoke about that last time around. And leadership and management are some topics that I've presented on. And to be honest, you go in and you talk about what's worked, what you've seen from others. I take things that Shane, Jay, some of the individuals that we've had here as guests, maybe put some of their own spice, some awesome sauce, as to reference it to you, some of their own, what I've learned from them, some of the great tips and tricks, put those into sessions. And then you come back to your agency, and while you're even doing those sessions, you say to yourself, wow, I'm dealing with something that's maybe challenging. Shane, you and I have spoke about that before with some challenges internally, because we will, we'll all bounce any kind of issue off of each other. That's the beauty of, I think, our relationship and the YPN fam. And so does that hold when you come back? Am I living up to what I'm preaching at a session? I like to think I do, but I think you can all relate to this. It's a lot easier to share the good, right? To share the success stories.
Sure.
But in the back of your mind, you know it's not a perfect world back home. You know, there are issues. What we do is manage people. So when you're managing people, typically what that means is something is happening or something comes up on a day-to-day basis where it's like, all right, this one came out of nowhere. Time to put out that fire. But ultimately, what does that mean? Someone's probably not happy, right?
Sure.
If you're putting out fires and working and around managing people. So this, I don't know if that answered your question, but I'd like to think it holds
No.
up, but it's a challenge. It's something I do think about is I'm going and doing this and I'm speaking to these groups from other states or wherever. And then I got to come back home and hope that I'm presenting myself in that same way for my own team and providing them with the resources they need.
I like to think you reach out to me for a different perspective. Jay reaches out to me to do just the opposite of whatever I recommend. That's normally how it goes. What do you think, Jay?
See, I'm a little bit different. Tom said, because I don't think I've ever really thought about this.
Mhm.
I love the concept. Now that I'm like, my wheels are turning in my head. The first thing that came to mind when you said, like, what's your perception in our profession, in the industry? It's been a while, but when I was in Indian Trail, there was a several year stint when I would see someone at conference that would introduce me to someone, and they'd introduce me because, hey, Jay started a new department and built it from scratch. And that was kind of like, there was several years of like, that was quote unquote, like what people were talking about for me doing,
Sure.
which was cool. And it was unique. And it was something that was mentioned to others that were in similar situations. It's kind of how like I got to know Nathan a little bit, Nathan Fort, because like Nathan was put into a similar role where like he wasn't the first hire, but he was one of the first hires building a department or growing it. So that conversation led to a lot of other agencies and other staff. Then fast forward to other things, kind of like what Tom mentioned, a lot of the sessions I've done at conferences around the country have been on professional development. So that's always been like my forte, my, most knowledgeable area to speak on and to preach about, and the importance of it and the value of it and the steps to take, and really like what someone should or could do to help set themselves up for success and stand out. And I would absolutely think I preach that because I'm always pushing our staff, whether it's in Concord right now or Mecklenburg County, be the best they can. And it even leads to conversations about, listen, like, I would much rather someone leave the agency that I'm leading or working with to make them a better person than stay with our department and hold them back.
Sure.
And not everyone may feel that way. Someone may say, well, why do you want them to leave? And the reality is, like, if they're going to pursue growth and be able to lead a bigger team or lead a team in general or take on more responsibilities, it's better for them. And it's going to show that we support that and we want that, because we want people to be bought into our culture. We want people to feel like they have ownership, and we want that teamwork atmosphere. And unless you provide that open door growth, professional development, you're not going to have all those things.
It's been interesting for me, to Tom's point, I think for a long time, and to Jay's actually, I think for a long time, the industry viewed me as the person that started the Young Professional Network. So it had nothing to do with my leadership or my ability to solve any problems. Like, I was just the person that started this thing, and this thing's fairly popular or it's relevant. And so I think it's grown into, I'm known as fairly creative or innovative. I'm also known as not everyone's cup of tea, that I'm pretty unique or different. And you either like me or you don't like me in some ways. But I think more than anything,
Or both.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In Jay's example, I think more than anything, I'm known as someone that just shoots from the hip or off the cuff, or is kind of this, maverick or whatever, is not going to follow any rules. And I think what people find out, I've had Kelsey come working under me as an AD, and she left College Station, had her for a year, and now Jeff's here, and Jonathan, who y'all met at NRPA, as my rec superintendent. So I've had some high level parking rec professionals come under my executive team. And I think they have found it in some ways is that I actually care way more than they would have thought I do about certain things. In fact, I'm very rarely off the cuff. I do not necessarily care about what you think of me as a parking rec professional or how I appear, but the things we're doing, I'm very intentional. I've almost thought about it more so than you could possibly imagine. Like, I'm very intentional. I mean, to the fact of the clothes I wear, or the shirts we order, or the designs we do, or as y'all have heard, how intentional I am about the egg hunts, for example, or some of those things. I think people from the outside are like, oh, he's a maverick. He just does what he wants. And some of that I think might be true, but I think people are surprised how much we're talking about and belaboring points and being super intentional and things. So not something like Jay that I really thought much about before. A lot of the people I'd hired earlier in my career in positions where I wasn't a director, I was looking for a profile of people that weren't coming from other cities because I wanted to mold them. I didn't want them to come in and say, well, Jay always did this in Mecklenburg. You know, I want someone that came from NERSA or a campus rec job or somewhere else. So they were just like, whatever the Shane guy tells us to do, that's what we're going to do. But as you grow in your career and you grow up the corporate ladder, I guess it's tough to get someone that you'd bring in as an AD who's never worked in our field before. At some point, you have to start bringing in people with experience and education in this job.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's been interesting.
I think one thing that's really neat though is we may not think about this all the time because, you know, we're so focused on improving our teams and our communities. And the reality is, like, there is a perception about all four of us on this call. I don't know who the fourth person is, but, you know, we all have been known for something, and it's going to be positive just because we're making an impact and because we're involved, because we're active. You know, we're going to conferences, we're speaking, we're on committees, we're on different teams. You know, there's all these different things that we've done to, you know, push the profession as far as we can. And that's positive. Like, you know, there's always going to be different things. And as much as like Shane and I will always disagree on some things, like I still respect him more than anyone. And I absolutely look up to him as a professional. And I'm always seeking that conversation because it's going to make me think differently.
Hannah, mark this, by the way. Mark. Okay, keep going.
But it's going to make me think differently. And, you know, it may not change my mind on something, but we've had very great conversations that make me look at a different lens, whether it's about innovation, whether it's about the way we do a master plan, whether it's Capra, resumes, interviewing. We've had all kinds of debates, but it's all in a fun, professional growth mindset to make us be better.
We did a presentation for Tom based explicitly on that we're the odd couple, really, of us. Jay and I are the odd couple. We're the night and day. You know, Jay's going to tell you to do one thing, I'm going to tell you to do the other. Both ways are successful. Here's why it matters, you know.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, both of us had great success, and there's no one way to do it. Yeah. And that's what people need to understand.
Well, building off. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I would just say, you know, we talk about that all the time internally with our agency, and, you know, there is a and a Z, right? And sometimes when you're talking about the alphabet, obviously it matters, but from the metaphor standpoint, what comes in the middle, it sometimes there is no right or perfect way to do everything. I also feel it's an interesting way to be kind of introspective about yourself and see if you hold true, Shane. Great question in the sense that think about it from a perspective of my community looks at me one way, my elected officials look at me a completely different way. And then you have professionals who are local. They know a little bit more about what we do on a day-to-day. You got maybe those that are statewide and then nationally. There's almost a different perception probably for all of those groups. But do they somehow hold the same core? I think that's what maybe the goal would be, is that ultimately you're holding true to most of those values, despite the fact that you're not going to know everything that everyone stands for or that we've all done.
Sure. I think we all just hope. And we know people that are professionals that are highly esteemed and regarded in our industry, but maybe their agency doesn't hold them in high regard. And that's, I think at times we've maybe even felt not fully to that extent, but you're like, man, I wish y'all knew what I was doing at an industry level. And, you know, it's just a local citizen berating you about something. But I think we just all hope that whether we're as advertised or not, when people come under us, they find good leadership that cares about them and allows them to grow as Park and Rec professionals. Well, I think that's a great segue to move to our guest. For those that can't see, and no one can, I said he's a he. Yes. He labeled himself. He did it. He labeled
it's a guy
as a proper Spurs fan. He's got a Parks and Rec gif of John Raffio saying something behind Ron Swanson's ear, which is hilarious. Our guest was a sports journalism major before they ultimately changed to comms. They, a lot like Jay, have some experience. They were the second director of their agency, so not the first, but the second. And it was a smaller agency, and then they moved to a larger agency with a very great reputation in the community, but they didn't move into that director role. So they had to step into a role that wasn't the director. And I'm pretty interested to have that, because we haven't talked to anybody about this really, but the idea of moving up but not taking on that director role is going to be something that I think is what some people go through. And I think it's a fascinating perspective. I've known this person a little longer than y'all have, but we all three ate together in Phoenix. This person's never been in the academy and has never been an academy extern, but they were an NRPA fellowship winner at one time. Any guesses so far?
I got an idea, but not a guess.
Okay. They're on the board of directors at their state, and they're chair of the legislative forum. Anything?
I have a guess.
Okay.
But
You're going to hold on to it? I think this next 10 will give them away. They're currently the assistant director of Parks and Recreation for the city of Pflugerville.
that wasn't my guess.
When you had mentioned Jay, you had apparently don't know your assistant director's name. I wanted to say that, and is Jeff our guest?
Jeff is our
That's
guest.
cool.
Jeff Achee, come on down.
Hey guys,
What's up, Jeff?
Welcome.
Pflugerville's in the house.
That's right.
I know. Surprised he didn't
outnumbered.
do another hey, we're in the same room type of interview like last time we had that.
We have a big
Remember-
event tomorrow, so we're working.
Oh, this is
remote.
perfect. So you guys are prepping hard. I also seem to remember we had, I believe, pizza, which was rated fairly high, although we all left, I wouldn't say disappointed, but maybe underwhelmed. And I feel like we talked about soccer or football or whatever you want to call it. And so
proper Spurs fan. He is a proper
Spurs.
Tottenham
Yes.
fan. He's also a proper San Antonio Spurs fan. He
yes,
is both.
all right.
Yeah. Yep, Jay, it was funny you brought it up. So I started off as a San Antonio Spurs fan. I've been a Spurs fan since I was 2 and gone to many, many Spurs games,
Nice.
which led to, well, now I got to pick a Premier League team. Who am I going to pick? Oh, there's one called Spurs. Yep, that's my team. So
That's easy. Yeah. So I couldn't tell you anything about those Spurs, but I definitely had a lot of games I used to watch during the real Spurs run with those big three over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a good life.
Well, I'm excited to have Jeff on. I think we'll probably talk a little bit about legislation, not something we've talked about before, but as I kind of hinted to before, Jeff was the director of Harker Heights for 6 years and was with the city of Harker Heights for 11 or 12, Jeff. Am I right on that number?
Yep, 11 years.
And then I think most people in the industry would say he did step up into a different role and to a larger agency that's doing a lot of stuff. I made sure that I said we were highly acclaimed in the lead up to that. But he had to step into the AD role. And I know Jay stepped into the direct superintendent role when he went to a super large agency with Mecklenburg and has now since gone to the AD role in Concord. But I think that is something that we haven't talked about in our 33 episodes so far, but it's something that's very viable for people in our industry, because sometimes to move up, you have to go to a larger agency, but that director role isn't always available. And maybe that AD role is the next step in that, or rec superintendent, or even a different role there. So I wanted to hear from Jeff and potentially even Jay, what that was like. Because I know Jeff has been under Pflugerville for 8 weeks now, but there has to be a moment. And if there's not, there will be, where Jeff wouldn't have done it the way I did it. And he has to support me and go through it. And I think that's growth, that's professional development. I think that's something all of our listeners would potentially be interested in. And so first, maybe with Jay, what was that like, Jay, going from, because I know you've mentioned since that you hadn't had to go to a council meeting for a couple of years as the rec superintendent, and you probably were appreciative of some of that. I think you're going to them now in Concord, but what was that transition like? And mentally, what was it like to kind of wrap your head around that?
Well, I think for me, the easy transition was getting back involved with a lot more. I think when you're in a large agency like in Mecklenburg County, there are a ton of benefits to that. And, it got me to where I am today. But a lot of times when you're in that large of an agency, when you have 500 full-time staff, unless you're the director, you're pretty much going to be like over one area or just pigeonholed to be over a small amount of the facilities or the divisions that you're managing. So that was, transitioning back to be with a smaller department where I can have my hands in every single piece of the pie was one of the easily goals I wanted to achieve. So that's great. I didn't go to council meetings when I was in the county because, you know, there was not a need to. I'm maybe the odd man in our industry. I enjoy council meetings. I actually really like going to those meetings. And I used to go to our park commission meetings in the county, and people thought I was crazy for liking that too. But like, I just enjoy the way things run. I like being able to see all aspects of the city that operates, not just park and rec, because then I can learn about the planning department. I can learn about the police department. I can learn about the airport. Like, we run an airport, so it's very different than, you know, so I'm just learning different things. So I think that is an aspect that is beneficial when I made that decision. And then, like you said, with, you know, coming in and being second in command, yeah, there's some things that you obviously want to look at and be like, oh, could we do it this way? But that takes time. And it doesn't mean that we won't get there, or Jeff may not get there, but you're not going to do that your first 8 weeks, like you just said. But, you know, as he gets comfortable and as he gets his feet wet, I would assume those conversations start happening.
What about you, Jeff? Was there an ego check in any way? Was it, no, let's move forward and do this? I know you shared some with me how you felt like you'd kind of done everything you could really do in Harcourt, and it was, you're never going to not have anything on the books that you want to accomplish, but you felt like you had accomplished a lot and it was a good jumping off point. But what was that transition like?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, Shane, but first of all, the picture I chose of John Ralphio kind of being goofy behind Ron Swanson is what I feel like at every single meeting that we're together for.
Right. He's always behind.
Wait, who's who?
I'm definitely John Ralphio in this. Shane's just, you know, rolling his eyes. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was obviously a big change, but there was some ego involved. But for me, it was kind of taking a look at where my agency was, where I wanted to go. I was fortunate enough to be promoted to director at 29 years old in my other agency. It was, you know, I grew up in that agency. I was there for 11 years. It provided me with so much. I am actually a pretty big proponent of starting out in a small agency because you're not going to get siloed. You're working in aquatics and events and athletics, and you're doing all the things, and some opportunities may come your way. Some small cities are tough to move up in because there's not very many positions. I certainly was, you know, worked hard, but was in the right place at the right time. And, you know, when something like this came available, the Pflugerville position, you know, I did have to eat ego a little bit, but I think I knew that I needed to grow, and a smaller agency is only going to take you so far. You're only going to learn so many things. You know, we had the small community issues, resources, and things like that, but I learned a lot. Jay, what you were just talking about with going to council meetings, you know, that's not something that many young professionals are doing. I obviously had to do that, you know, every other week was at a meeting, and then the off weeks was at a council workshop, and learning a lot about how the city operates, and learning a lot about planning and zoning and PD issues and FD issues. So it certainly set me up for what I'm doing now. But it's kind of one of those weird things, you know, we always are trying to explain what it is that we do to friends that aren't in Parks and Recreation or family. And, you know, in that same vein, trying to explain, well, so you're a director now, but you're going to an assistant director. How does that work? And, you know, it's not, I always explained it, it's not apples to apples. You know, I'm the director of an agency that's allows us to be very creative, and you have to be very creative in a small agency. You've got to do a lot with a little, to a growing community and a really booming urban area in Austin that's doing a lot of things that Parks and Rec professionals across the country wish they were able to do, you know, building these large rec centers and looking at big park plans and things like that. So for me, it was the job responsibilities, not necessarily the title, was going to be something that for me is, I'm going to get a huge amount of growth out of. So I wouldn't even say it was tough for me. It was almost more tough explaining it to people than it was actually making the decision. But you certainly do have to, I almost in a meeting yesterday introduced myself as the director. You know, you certainly have to like get used to this. This is not my role anymore. And it's very different. But I've enjoyed it so far.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that question? It's very fascinating. I really enjoyed hearing both of your responses. So there are first of all, I want to go back to what you just said, Jeff, about titles. We up here are dealing with what's called civil service, and so a lot of the titles are regulated, and it really can handcuff you in a lot of different ways. I've always adopted that, hey, yeah, there's titles, there's these civil service job descriptions, but we have to hire sometimes that way, or we have to go through a process. But after that, I throw it out the window. I mean, the job description and the title means a lot less to me than maybe some other individuals. And there are probably individuals out there who are title chasers too, right?
Sure.
That's it. I want to be a director or commissioner, whatever it is. Shane and I, though, had a few conversations about this. I served as assistant director for my last organization for 2.5 years. I was there. And the term, what I've learned over the last 11 years in a director role, the term ignorance is bliss is real. It is that is a real concept. As assistant director, my director and me now, I shield a lot from my team that they don't need to know right now. There are some other lines of thought of that. I had a conversation with my AD today about this, that, yeah, I could tell you everything. And some people might look at that as being, well, you're being transparent. Well, I'm not being not transparent. I'm trying to protect my team from some of the issues and conversations that happen at maybe board levels or whatever it is. So Shane and I joked that after doing this for so long, I would be glad to be your assistant director any day, because there's a huge weight that comes with that. So I wanted to ask you, I know it's been a short period of time. Can you share maybe what you miss most about the director role, but maybe some of the other side of it where you're like, you know what, hey, I'm not in a director position and this is amazing?
You know what's funny about that is it's kind of the same thing. Like, I miss and I don't miss that responsibility of being director. I enjoy, oddly, I'll probably get to do some of this stuff because it might be some things that Shane doesn't quite enjoy, but I always liked going and talking to the civic groups about what we're doing in Parks and Rec, and having that relationship with city council. Again, small town city council is very different and very relational, and they add you on Facebook and you're encouraged to add them back, that kind of thing. So it's very different, but I will say I kind of enjoyed some of that. However, it is kind of nice not being the last line of defense. And I think, fortunately, Shane and I work really well on that. But yeah, there is a lot that's on your shoulders that it's kind of lonely sometimes, even in a small organization, when you're very close with your staff. But there are a lot of moments when you feel like the weight of the world is on you, and you really can't let others know that, else it's going to impact whatever event is coming up or what programs you're doing, because there's some big picture things that's going to impact staff, but that they don't necessarily need to know at that moment, but and you may know months in advance something that's going to come down the pipe that's going to impact everybody. I certainly don't miss that part. But there's a really neat responsibility that goes along with being the Parks and Recreation director. It's why a lot of Parks and Recreation directors do so well in city management positions, is because of that front facing. You get along well with the community. All the prominent community members, they know you well. Hopefully you have good relationships with them, and they want to know you because of the things that you're doing, the way that you're impacting the community. That part's pretty neat. That doesn't really mean you can't do that as assistant director, but you're not the person that they're seeking out. They really want to build that relationship with the director, and that can be cumbersome in certain ways or in certain circumstances. But it can also be really rewarding with members of the community that are, they like you, want to make the community better.
It's interesting. We were in Nashville, I believe, and I asked Noons. I was telling them, and Tom and I have talked, and our YPM fam knows. Anyone who's been on those calls, of course, Tom and Jay never participate because they're too good for us. But anyone that participates on those calls knows that's like my goal someday is to. One of my top 5 movies is The Intern, and it's Robert De Niro's character coming back and helping a lady that's got a clothing company, and he just kind of shows her that she was the leader that she was hoping she could be, and he creates a couple pathways for her to find that. And I would love to be the assistant director to Maria someday, or to Katie Keller, someone that I have a lot of affinity for, that I could come in and maybe help get the staff following whatever, and they could stay big picture. I think it would be great. I was asking Chris Noons, who we all have a great affinity and a respect for her. I said, could you ever do that? And he looked at me like I had grown a fucking horn in the middle of my head. Like, he was like, and I was like, not even for someone like Kate Meacham, someone that you have a lot of respect for. He was like, no. And of course, he's moved up from director to COO. And so, I guess, and he was probably matriculating through that process either in his head or even maybe actually process wise with the agency at some point. So maybe it just seemed so crazy, but I do think that I could go work for Kelsey someday or someone else as their AD just as easily. Cause I feel a heavy burden being the director of Parks and Rec, and I'm constantly trying to disappoint staff at a rate that they can tolerate. And I know how I come off. And I know sometimes like staff, my executive team does a really great job of saying, Shane, Gabby needs some support, or you obviously think Gabby's doing a great job, but she's not hearing it from you. Cause I can be pretty aloof. If you let me get really big picture, I can come in, and I'm sure Jeff has seen this. I'll come into a building that me and Jeff and Jonathan are all in, and I won't say hi to any of them. I just come in because I'm thinking about something, and I walk straight in my office and I take my bag off, and then I'm starting to email, and I never even think to say hi to my team. And so sometimes my team has to do a good job of telling me, hey, this staff member would love to hear from you. And I would love to tell them that I think they're doing a good job. And I enjoy buying them a Monster and a gift card and finding them out in the field and saying, hey, thanks for doing what you're doing. But it's not my default. It's not what it's not something my radar didn't pick that up. My radar, I can just grind. Y'all know me. I'll be in the office till 7 or 8 o'clock tonight and every other night, and I can grind. And I don't look up and say, oh, wow, does the rec coordinator of Kent need to be told she's doing a good job? Because she is. But I just not thinking, does she need to be reached out? Partly because I never wanted anyone to tell me I was doing a good job. I was fine being left alone. And I think when you're growing up in this field, you will only manage the way you would prefer to be managed in your head. So if Emily, my ACM, who's great, I think y'all got to meet her. She came to Dallas, she, assistant city manager. If she never talked to me for the next 5 years, I'd be thrilled. Like if I just got to do what I wanted to do and no one ever talked to me, I'd be thrilled. Now, every time Emily talks to me, she's super supportive, super caring. Even when she's breaking bad news to me, she does it in a great way. It's not like I have some terrible relationship with her, but I'd prefer to never talk to anybody again. So like I sometimes manage that way because that's how I would love to be managed, so staff has to do a better job of telling me. But it's funny, you talk to people like Noons, he's like, there's no way I could be an AD again. And that's all I think about is going back down, when I have the opportunity to step back into a role. Cause I told Jeff this, I spend 50% of the time thinking I'm the best damn Parks and Rec director in the country. And the other 50% of the time thinking at any point they're going to figure me out. And I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like I'm winging it up here, and so I
question that
literally
sometimes.
live that. I live
It
that.
is important. It is important to note that Shane buys that Monster for everyone, knowing they don't drink Monsters, so that they give it to him.
That's right. Oh, you don't like Monster? Well,
That's-
you're still doing a good
that's
job.
right.
I'll take that off your hands.
So many follow-up questions to Shane, and that's not what the show's about. But one of them was going to be, what if you don't like Monster? I mean, come on, man, work with me.
So, okay. Valid question here. If Jeff would have came to work on the first day drinking a Red Bull, what would you have done?
Fired him. He's within 6 months.
Yeah.
In fact, if he fucks up on this chat, he's still within his first 6 months. So
Yeah,
he's in trouble.
I'm being very careful. This is the second interview, basically.
I know. I'm actually thinking about like muting Shane and asking a question that like he can't hear, so that we
he
can
can
get
ask me.
answer.
He's been honest. Now that's one thing. My
Unfiltered.
Staff, I think Jeff could attest to this. I definitely get critical feedback from staff. They'll tell me if they think I'm crazy, or if I'm wondering when I shouldn't be wondering, or this is way outside of your purview. I mean, we were talking with Junior one time, and I was talking about one of his staff, and we're in an executive team. Junior's my park superintendent, a great guy I've had all 5 years. And Junior at one point said, hold up, this is my fucking decision. I ultimately hire who the foreman is. And I was like, oh, yep, you're right. Good call. This is we're wondering about your hire, and this is still your call, so I definitely you can ask Jeff whatever you want. I'm not going to fire him immediately. I'll hold it against him and fire him later, but.
Sure. And I will say, not to make this the Butter Shane Up podcast episode, but one of the reasons that I was, I think, good with, I didn't have to think too long or too hard about the going from director to assistant director role was because I knew, and I had worked with Jonathan for 5 years. We worked together. And so I had been able to talk to him in addition to being able to talk to Shane too, because we knew each other pretty well. But that I knew I was going into a place where the director did think very differently from the way I think. And that was important to me. If I'm going to go work under somebody after being a director, even for a smaller agency, I wanted to know that I was going to learn something. I was going to do something different. I was going to have my voice heard as well. But, that kind of thinking creatively, I think Jonathan told me this. And again, sorry, I'm buttering Shane up on this podcast, but, Shane will make you think differently about Parks and Recreation issues and things that we're working through. And that's been true for me. And I always thought that was something that I don't think I was super well known for, but I hope that my staff thought that about me. And so it's worked out really well here.
Jeff, you said something that kind of like rings a bell that I want to dive into and maybe ask another question based off of this. So we mentioned earlier, people that might just job hunt for a title. And I think in your role that you just said, the good thing is if someone can jump from a director role to assistant director role, it doesn't matter the title sometimes, as long as you're still growing and you're still learning. I remember I texted Shane when he left Missouri City. I think it was Missouri City, when I said something to you in the regard of like, titles don't matter. Like, you're still going to make an impact. But then you responded, you're like, well, I got a new director job or something. It was kind of funny because I was like trying to hype it up where like, it doesn't matter whether you're a director or assistant director or superintendent. Like, you want to be in a situation where you can always learn and grow, regardless of what that is. So as long as you know that the leadership there is something you can grow from, then you're going to set yourself up for success. My question for you now, knowing that, and obviously you've known Shane, is there an aspect of Pflugerville that like excited you other than Shane? Like, put the leadership side of it away, knowing you're the AD, like when you're looking for an opportunity to grow and you're looking for a new role, like what is it that you want to get out of it so that you'll be happy there?
Yeah, I think coming from a director role, you understand the community really well and you understand the importance of that. Harker Heights, where I was before, which was not something I was used to as a military community. It's in the what was Fort Hood, what is now Fort Cavazos area. And community building is really tough in an area like that because people are there for 2 years, they're gone, they may come back, they're gone. I think we did a really good job. I think they continue to do a really good job of building that community around that fact. But Pflugerville, you drive around Texas and you see these little, and y'all are going to roll your eyes at this, but these little PF stickers on the back of people's vehicles. He's got his PF sticker on his cup there, and his fridge back there. He's got PF stickers everywhere. But there's this. I don't have one.
Nope.
We'll have to send some. We'll have to send some. We've got some good ones.
I'd probably get a shirt from Jeff before I got it from Shane, and I've been asking Shane for 5 years, maybe 10.
You're very, very likely to get a shirt.
That'll probably for me. Be the biggest difference between Shane and I. I'll give you a shirt the first time you ask.
Yeah.
But I think that the kind of, so it's a very diverse community, but that culture around Pflugerville, there's a pride there in just the name, the goofy name and everything. It's kind of something I wanted to be part of, see what that's like compared to a place where people are very transient. So that was certainly a big part of it. And again, it's growing like crazy. And I think the idea of being somewhere that is going to provide you with some new opportunities when you're in an agency that you don't get to do a lot of projects, for example, those projects become really, really important and you really don't want to mess it up and everything's got to be perfect. And in Pflugerville, there's like, you have the chance to kind of work out what is perfect. You do something somewhere and you might say, well, we'd probably do that differently. And then you have another project to do that thing differently. And so that not just growth for growth's sake, but growth because you're learning and you're getting to do these things. I will say on that though, it's a really tough thing for, I think, young professionals when they are looking at, none of us get into this field for the money, but titles come with some salary increases as well. And I think that it's probably easier for us to say that in leadership roles. It was probably easier, honestly, for me if I was going from a recreation superintendent role to like a coordinator position, even if it's a bigger city, maybe a salary increase, all that stuff. That might be a little bit more difficult than I'm a director. I'm comfortable going to assistant director because I know what this means. So again, not apples to apples for every situation. It is hard for young professionals when they're trying to move up, and that title might mean something to them, and you don't realize that until then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I could relate. And even when I had mentioned the title chaser, I should have prefaced that as well. I mean, when you are working your way up through, right?
It comes with ambition, right?
It does. It does. It comes with ambition.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can make an argument one way or another that the money means a lot, but it's a lot of the recognition and the promotion and really the growth, right? So I want to shift gears in a minute, but I do want to just stay with Pflugerville for a second and just ask the $1 million question, and then we can stop talking about Shane forever. What is one trait, characteristic? What is something you really weren't aware of with your relationship, your prior relationship with Shane, that you have since found out from working with him?
So I knew that every meeting was going to be filled with curse words, so I was pretty well prepared for that.
That's our first interaction. Like,
I've got a story about that.
Met me, and he was I was some dude in the back cursing. He was like, "Who the hell is that guy?" Yeah, that was.
We were forming. Yeah, this is getting off on a tangent, but we were forming the Texas Recreation and Park Society's version of the YPN. So we were in I think our first or second meeting about that. Probably 2 years before this ever even got formed. We were at conference and we were discussing what the future in young professionals was going to look like. And there's this bearded guy in the back, just dropping F-bombs. And I like turned to someone I knew and was like, who is this guy? I had no idea who Shane was at that time. And here we are 10 years later. But, again, I'm sorry. You asked the question, so this is on you, Tom, but this is the Buttering Shane Up podcast. The thing that Shane's personality is what it is. I was not prepared for how, and he might hate doing it, but he's very good at it, how good he is one-on-one with patrons. So when we had an issue at a council meeting a few weeks ago that it got a little ugly, but there was some folks there that were really concerned about this topic. And we went out in the lobby afterwards, and Shane he was all ears. He was hearing them out. He was allowing them to vent. He was not the Shane you would think, kind of giving it back to him. He was in receive mode and did a really, really good job with that. I think they left not super happy, but I think they left feeling like their voice was heard. And I think that might not be something that people quite realize about him without working with him and seeing those interactions when they start out very negative. On top of that, we were at a park for a staff event the other day, and we had some extra bubbles, and Shane just goes out to every single kid he finds, and he's talking to them and he's giving them bubbles. And so he's got this soft spot in his heart people don't get to see.
Well, you both seem right now, it's, and I've obviously had conversations with you prior to this, but we talk a little bit about Working Genius on this show every once in a while. And you had mentioned it earlier, Jeff, about how, you're the guy in the back yelling things out. It's in Shane, we know that maybe there might be some tasks that you don't prefer, right? And that's all about Working Genius. What gives you joy and what does not? It seems like the two of you offset each other pretty well, which obviously I know that's intentional by nature. Are you familiar with the Working Genius assessment?
I am. Yes.
All right. Share with us. What do we got? What are we looking at with Jeff?
So I took the test twice and got two different answers. And so I had to figure out what I thought. And these were a couple years apart.
He had one that was both.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was galvanizer, I believe. So
galvanizer.
I'm definitely a galvanizer. I do love being in the AD role. I didn't have an AD at my other agency, so I do love being in an AD role, getting to talk about that vision and then ultimately it's Shane's vision, and I get to galvanize people behind that. I enjoy that. The one that has gone back and forth is whether I'm a wanderer or a discerner. And I think I'm realizing in a room full of wanderers that I'm a little bit more discerner.
I think you are. Yeah, I think
Yep.
I attract wanderers. We wander all the time. So I think that's why you scored strong wandering, but I do think you're a GD. I think you're a galvanizer and a discerner.
Yep. Yep. So that's actually been really fun. We have a lot of wander
Yeah.
sessions in Pflugerville, and being the person who's, not a stick in the mud always, but sometimes a stick in the mud
Mhm.
has been pretty fun.
You're everybody's favorite at those meetings.
That's right. That's right.
Just like
They
Jay.
love having me aboard.
He brings his D head out, his discernment head.
I knew I liked him.
Yeah, we onboard everybody in the Working Genius. All 45 full-time staff have taken it. I mean, I'm a big wonder. I'm as big of a wonder, I think, as you can be in any one of those 6 stages. Like, I don't think I've ever met someone who wonders about things more than me. So,
No, me neither.
yeah, we definitely have wonder sessions, but yeah, I would say that you're a galvanizer, which we needed. We had very little galvanizers on my team, which made me have to galvanize. And even if you think I'm good at it, it drains me, power drains me. So it's great to have Jeff come in and galvanize. And I do think he's a discerner, which is great because Kelsey was a discerner as well. So we didn't lose anything in that. She had discerning and tenacity, but it was great to always lean into Kelsey's discernment. And it's really great to lean into Jeff's as well.
Frustrations, Jeff, just really quick, share those two with us, and then we can move on to Jay's question.
I only focus on the positive. I'm trying to remember what my
You're a galvanizer
my
for sure.
frustrations
All
are.
right.
Tenacity
Yeah.
was one of your frustrations.
Tenacity, I think, is my frustration.
Okay.
Which
Biggest.
we need a little bit of that as well. And I'm doing my best.
And I think
So
invention
that's how I sleep well at night, is a lot of tenacity.
was invention the other one.
Yeah, I think invention. I think it was an IT or my frustrations.
Well, for our listeners out there that want to know what Shane's are, there is a text chain that we were sharing once when we were going through all these tests. And Shane is a wanderer and a innovative genius, but his frustrations, he wrote Tom and Jay. So that'll make you realize
That's true.
what really frustrates him.
T and J.
That's absolutely true. Well, let's talk about legislation. It's not something we've talked about before. And I'll be quite honest, before Jeff basically said, I'll work for you, but you got to be on my ledge committee, I felt very comfortable in my 19 years as a park and rec professional saying that's someone else's problem. Like, I'm not walking the halls. I'm not calling anybody. Our legislation is going to be on the hands and the heads and the shoulders of whoever, for us, Traps was appointing to do that role, and I wasn't going to do it. And I bet Jeff felt that. Jeff has been our ledge chair for 4 or 5 years. And before that, a gentleman that Jeff worked under was our ledge chair for a while as well. So Jeff has been involved with the legislative side for a long time. So, and we're working right now through some things that Jeff is leading us on that I think is going to help us in our next steps. But would love to hear Jeff overall talk about a legislative platform and why it actually matters for park and rec professionals to care about legislation and to reach out to your local legislation reps, and then maybe hear what Jay and Tom do or don't do on the ledge side.
Well, so there's a lot there. So the legislative committee, I think y'all were talking about what you're known for around the industry, and I haven't gotten super involved quite yet in the national side of things. So a lot of people listening might say, Jeff is who? But around the state, and I will tell you this, so I kind of go backwards a little bit. So doing the legislative committee, it's a really tough job. It's probably the most work outside of being the president of the organization that anybody does. And it has been for forever. Anybody who's doing it is doing a ton of work outside of their regular job. And so I will say, coming on to Pflugerville, I deservedly or undeservedly had this reputation as the person who gets things done legislatively. And I was thinking, I've done this the whole time at one agency. If I go to another agency, they might realize I'm a fraud. But anyways, I don't think we're there. So legislative committee for probably every state organization is going to focus primarily on your state legislature. And then you will kind of follow the lead of NRPA and do some stuff at the federal level. But For those that haven't really gotten involved in it, you may not quite realize how much it impacts what everybody does day to day. And I can't speak to how it works in other states, but in Texas and I think most other states, all of our power as municipalities derives from the state allowing us to do these things, whether they allow it or they disallow it. In Texas, we're dealing with a lot of opposition to cities just broadly, and so we're facing some pretty steep uphill battles with a legislature that's kind of hostile to municipalities right now. Now, historically, that really hasn't impacted Parks and Rec very much, because Parks and Rec, when we walk into somebody's office, they're so happy to hear that we're Parks and Recreation professionals. They see that we work for a city or whatever, but they know that this is going to be a fun conversation. They get to talk about parks. Now, that kind of changes a little bit as a legislature kind of gets their hands in different things that might impact our ability to provide services or new park facilities. We just had a little bit of a fight with the Texas legislature on parkland dedication, for example, in the last session. And so, it's not something we were anticipating. All of a sudden, the legislative session rolls around and there's a bill that was filed that was aimed at large cities over 800,000 population, but it was really going to take the teeth out of parkland dedication. So kind of for the first time, we saw ourselves in the middle of a somewhat controversial fight. And I think that really made people realize this is something that impacts us. I have to get involved. So the silver lining to that was we got a lot of folks now at our state level that are seeing the importance of it. Here in Texas, for the longest time, we were fighting for about 3 decades. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is partly, majorly funded by a tax on sporting goods sales. So the sporting goods sales tax is supposed to go to Texas Parks and Wildlife. Well, that was never a constitutional dedication. It was just a bill that said we're going to give some of these revenues to Texas Parks and Wildlife. So from 1993 to 2019, 40% of those revenues actually went to Texas Parks and Wildlife instead of all of them. So for that entire 3-decade span, TRAPS, the legislative committee, a lot of different organizations across the state were fighting. We were unified in fighting for that money to go to Texas Parks and Wildlife. And thus, Texas Parks and Wildlife, like a lot of state organizations, does grant programs. So that's not just state parks. That also goes to local parks. They help build those facilities. And in 2019, that finally got on the ballot to do a constitutional dedication of those funds, and that passed. And so then we were kind of having to figure out, okay, we had our big victory. Now what does this look like? And to be truthful, there was a little bit of a lull, I think, in the advocacy of professionals, because all right, we won, we got this. Now what? And again, kind of going back to that parkland dedication ordinance fight, it made people realize, no, this is a thing that's continual. We have to continue this fight. We have to have our voice heard. Often young professionals really want to get involved in advocacy, which is fantastic. But there's a lot to learn. And we were at a point where we really needed our leadership staff, people that are in leadership roles across the state, to get involved and have our name be out there in the halls of the Capitol. And so we've kind of reworked our legislative committee to get a lot of leaders in very different positions on that committee, and I think we're poised to do some pretty cool things. But again, going back to, a lot of folks think we're Parks and Rec, there can't possibly be that many things that are controversial in our area. That's just unfortunately not true, and especially in the times we're in now, where things are so divided, we can kind of be that force that unites a little bit, but we still have to do work to do that.
Yeah, well, we that's fascinating. Our state association can learn a lot from that. I can't wait to share a little bit of this with them, and hopefully, if you're willing, you might be able to make yourself available to someone as a resource, because
yeah, absolutely,
what you're doing and the impact you're making, I honestly wouldn't say it's that common that a state association, although I don't know, can have that impact on the legislature. You know, from my perspective, what I've seen is typically following the lead of NRPA. So I did serve on the public policy committee for NRPA just for a few years. And the chair during my tenure was one of our former guests, Joe Turner. And Jeff, you hit it on the head. We should be here to unite the community, not necessarily to pick a side, right? Like that's not what Parks and Recreation is all about. And that's always a challenge when we are ultimately part of especially municipal recreation, right? We are part of a government agency. So there may come a time where you're asked to be put in those positions that you really didn't ever intend to be in. But as Joe so well put it, red plus blue equals green, right? So that's one of the best lines that I've ever heard on our show. It's stuck with me. I use it all the time now. And so, I appreciate all of what you've shared with us, and following the lead of NRPA, a lot of people can, you could definitely try to make an impact locally, at your state level through reaching out to your legislators, because they do provide a nice toolkit sometimes when there is some federal legislation out there that needs potentially our word, or that can impact the work that we're doing. And I remember they had a park champion campaign. I'm not so sure if NRPA is still doing that or not, to be honest. So I don't know if that speaks to its success or not, but it helped us out, and it helped my organization utilize templates, reach out to our legislators. And even as simple as, hey, get them at your table, invite them to your events, showcase what you do. And that it was very effective for us. We reached out, we started to get them to coming at our events. There were photo opportunities, which of course most of them really love. They want to stamp, they like stamping their name on the happy, right? The rainbows. And that's what we do. So that's kind of my experience. But what you've done is really impressive, and I think a lot of the states and local organizations can take a lot from that. I'm assuming it's helped you within your own agencies as well.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think that, largely we don't really think about it this way, but advocacy at the state, and especially I think federal level, is intimidating for some people, even people in director roles. It's intimidating to go, like, what do I even talk about? How am I supposed to build this relationship? But we all do it, especially if you're in a AD role, a director role. We do it with our local elected officials. It's the exact same thing. You're trying to build that relationship so that when you do have an ask or a need, you're not just cold calling a representative, just like a council member. You've built that relationship with a council member. So when you're presenting something, they have that trust that this has been thought out. I know this department. I know that they work well. I may not even agree with what they're asking me to approve, but I trust them. And it's the exact same thing with our legislators. And yeah, so it's building that relationship, which can be tough. And I think, we struggle with it at the state level. I'm sure NRPA struggles with it at the federal level. Getting people I'm interested in advocacy. I love Parks and Recreation. I want to advocate for it, to that call to action and responding to that call of action is not easy. And, that does kind of start at the state level. I think, I'm not sure if they are still doing the Park Champions program, but, we've talked about doing something like that at the state level and emulating it. So maybe we get with NRPA and we try to figure out how we can help that be successful too.
Before we get to Jay, because I want to hear what Jay's experience is in North Carolina, I think you said something that is really true, Jeff. It's probably one of the most intimidating things. We have talked often about intimidation and speaking at a national audience, or speaking your first time at a state conference, or some of the growing pains that we go through as a park and rec professional. But Jeff has been in front of and doing those interviews that you see on CNN, almost like being called out in front of the legislation and literally speaking on behalf of TRAPS as an organization. And I couldn't imagine what that would be like, to be up there and advocating against developers trying to pull this parkland dedication or whatever it is. I do think it's quite intimidating to be the person that's up there speaking on the Hill, so to speak, in an investigation, or in some sort of assembly where they're asking you questions, or going hall to hall and being able to speak articulate well what the industry does and why you need their support. Jay, what do y'all do?
From the North Carolina perspective, the state association has a leadership team that kind of takes the lead on everything. I have not been super involved in it. I think my extent of being involved from the legislative side of it is there's statewide grants that are available every year, but the funding fluctuates. So, we've been asked in the past that, the more department directors and department leaders and ADs can, advocate for increased funding for the grant programs, it would benefit the state. And I've done that, just written letters and emails and made some phone calls. I have not, marched down to someone's office and gone as far as Jeff has gone, but it got me thinking, as we were talking earlier, as a professional development growth perspective, I'm trying to can and stand out. There's probably not a lot of young professionals that have done that like Jeff has. And it also got me thinking, well, what can we do, or what can Jeff do to like help achieve that for others? And this would be an awesome session from
100%.
state associations around the country or NRPA, and I'm going to lean on, Shane, your question kind of pivoted a little bit, but like we've talked so much about the CPC and the conference program committee. I don't know that there's been a lot of sessions regarding this topic. No. And it would be super relative and super beneficial for so many people to learn just basic steps that Jeff has talked about here with us on what they can do to improve their state. And then it also, it leads to me, it's like, it's not only education on legislation and what we can do from big picture industry, but it's also going to help people professionally from public speaking, from just overall confidence and, growth with politicians and being able to learn that rope of what it looks like to get involved in the political world. So I don't know if you're interested in that, Jeff, but I would highly, highly recommend that think about for future conferences.
Yeah. Something about how to guide your state's leadership through a legislative platform, and talk about how you create a platform and how you create priorities under them, and who do you work with to get that platform out. I mean, I think there would be a lot of states that would benefit from that for sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
I would love to do that. I mean, I was lucky enough. Shane mentioned it. So he's the ACM in Harker Heights now. Jerry Bark was the Parks and Rec director, first one we ever had. He was the legislative committee chair right before I was. And when he transitioned to city management, he obviously is transitioning away from involvement at the state agency and all that stuff. But there was an opening, and we had started the legislative session in 2021. So Texas legislature meets every other year for 140 days. And the session had started, and there was not a legislative committee chair. And so I reached out to the current president and said, hey, I'd be willing to help to try to, I've gone down the hallway and talked to Jerry about this many times. And a week later, I got the call. Hey, would you mind being the chair of that committee? And, my initial response was, yeah, but
sure. Yeah.
And then, 3 years later, here we are, and I've learned a ton, but I took that leap because I had that person. I had that person to reach out to, and I could go across the parking lot to City Hall now and still ask him some questions. And the further on I got, I needed to do that less, but a lot of professionals don't have that. And I recognize that they didn't have somebody that they were reporting directly to that was doing the exact same thing. So I would love to be that contact for people. I'm happy to, if there's anyone listening that wants me to come talk to a state agency, I'd be happy to do that. Now I absolutely will submit an NRPA presentation. So, I mean, I do that a lot. We do legislative updates and we talk about the process and all that stuff, but I do think that the how to get started is a good thing. You
went to the North Texas directors meeting recently and did that. And you're also speaking to the Houston area directors association as well. So he definitely travels around.
Well, Jeff, and it's about a legislative update. I hadn't really considered how do we present to get people comfortable. Yeah. So that's kind of a different way of thinking about it.
Jeff, maybe, if you're up to it, and it could be anybody, obviously, but you already gave a little plug out there for our audience that they might be interested, but I'd love to take you up on it. And maybe we could workshop something on a virtual level for New York State. And it could be something where it could be a little a pilot run for you to see how it goes. Great. And so we'll get in contact after this. I'd love to even from we all have, at least in my state association, we have a legislative committee. It's not nearly as robust, and the processes are not in place for what you're doing over there. So even if that's a big focus of it, I'm sure a lot of states can learn from it.
Happy to do it.
We're working on our platform now for the Ledge Committee and hoping to have it ratified by our committee and to our board of directors for traps by, I think, middle of June. So we can get it ratified and voted on, so we can get it out there to the legislative staff so they know what our platform is heading into the fall when bills start to be created.
Y'all would be so proud of Shane. He's leading that subcommittee. He's leading our platform discussion.
Look at that.
Until he gives it to you.
It's all grown up.
Right.
And I can't say no because now I work for him.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it'll switch over pretty soon.
Well, we normally do some hijinks on this show, depending on whatever guests we have. We got some round robin games or questions or things like that. One we haven't asked in a while, and it would be interesting for your perspective. If you could go to dinner with 3 Park and Rec professionals, alive or past, what 3 Park and Rec professionals would you have at that table and why?
Those other than you 3, right?
No one's ever selected us.
No,
Okay.
no. I mean,
This is
they
my
had their
dream
podcast,
dinner.
They were done.
Not even one of us.
We had to make up for that pizza we had,
that's
right.
true.
an unnamed location in Arizona.
Right.
I think that, so largely when I think of a lot of this stuff, and I didn't come from a Parks and Recreation degree plan. I don't know a lot of the big players in the Parks and Recreation game before us, I think. But I actually think, so just so y'all know, first time, long time on this podcast. But I think somebody used one of the answers, and it's pretty near and dear to me because he's close to us and he's a professor at my alma mater. But Shane and I were on a call with Dr. John Crompton the other day, and he is a fascinating person to listen to. I think he would certainly be on that.
You
that
might
list.
only need one person if you have John. He can talk
That's
all
right.
the time. Yeah.
Just me and him. And it might just be Dr. Crompton after a little bit. So I'll have to go home and go to sleep. But I think probably because of that perspective, and I don't even have names to drop, but I would love to have somebody, and this can be past or present, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I would just love to have somebody who was a Parks and Recreation director or professional when this was not a field that has the support we have now. Maybe somebody who was large city in the 50s and 60s when they're really trying to establish, Jay, you talked about establishing a Parks and Recreation department. I think it'd be fascinating to hear someone's perspective when this was not the industry that it is now and what they had to go through.
A Robert Crawford.
Yeah. Yes, it would be really, really interesting. And then of course I would want to hear Leslie Knope's story. So I'll throw Leslie Knope in there.
There you go.
Who, Jay? Jay, who's Leslie Knope?
I'm starting to know who they are now.
He's a
okay.
Midwest
I
Park.
still have not seen an episode, but I know the names now. At least some of them.
At this point, is it because you're so dug in, you kind of want to see it, but you don't want them to win?
It sure feels that way.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It was funny because you guys were talking about the names in the picture, and like I knew the one name, I didn't know the other name, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to know. Like, is that a person that's in every episode, or is he like a one-off?
Nah, comes
Couple
off
seasons though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
couple seasons. So
Just the best ones.
Fun fact is that I don't know if Jay's ever seen a clip of even the show, right? But we did our joint session, and I'm pretty sure that might have been the first time he's ever. So I put a little clip of Parks and Rec in that
Nice.
session, made him watch one.
That was the longest I've ever seen of any Parks and Rec episode. Is in our session for 30 seconds.
It
Jay,
was 30 seconds.
Let me ask, if we would have keynoted Maryland and we were literally interviewing Nick Offerman, would you have crammed a couple episodes in so you could have speak, or would you literally sit on stage with that gentleman and say, no, I've never seen your work. I have no knowledge of who you are or what you did.
It would probably like play in well to like, from what I've heard, his character or just him as a comedian.
Sure.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, I think he might kind of like it.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he would have believed me,
Right.
but I would have kept the path going where it's going.
Can I ask just one fun question? I know we're not doing round robin, but I am a student of travel food, I guess you would say. I love to learn a little bit about and Shane's told me so much about Austin in the area. I want to see either if your thoughts align with his, but where's your go-to now that you're in Pflugerville? Where would you tell me to go if I came there for one meal?
I haven't ventured out too far, but uh, this is going to be such a stereotypical answer for a Texan, but it's barbecue.
Yeah.
Specifically,
And Pflugerville is home to a top 50 barbecue joint by Texas Monthly, which is Brotherton's Barbecue. And we were just there the other day, and it's fantastic. They do a little bit of a spin on Texas barbecue. So they had a jerk chicken that you don't see at Texas barbecue restaurants very often. It was spot on. It was fantastic. But
all right,
I mean, if you're going to come anywhere to Texas and you don't have barbecue, then you have failed your mission.
Okay, that's fair.
Now, Tom and Jay know Hannah really well. And Hannah, if Tom and Jay ever visit us, and it doesn't seem like they ever will, we're probably going to take them to NG Cafe.
NG Cafe is great too. NG Cafe is a Mize hotspot, and I actually went there the other day to work because it was so peaceful. They found a good one.
They have Pflugerville residents running it, and they used to run a shop in Round Rock that Bourdain visited when he was in Texas, and they sold that in Round Rock and created a new little cafe that has great Vietnamese food, carrot sandwiches and all.
Well, I actually thought of you the other day, and it's weird that I had to say this eating lunch thinking of you, but tacos. And one of my tacos was chorizo and potatoes.
There you go. There you go. Was it good?
It was very good.
That is
I'm not sure if it would meet your standard, but I thought it was good.
Right.
That's another one. I forgot our old offices. We just moved, but our old offices were right across the street from one of the better breakfast tacos you'll get in Texas, which was aptly named the Taco House.
And
they didn't have to get that creative since the food was so good.
I ate there 4 days a week. I just
used to tell us. I remember. Yeah.
Jeff, if you were starting a department from scratch and you could build it with people you've never worked with before, but you know of in the industry, who's your AD? You're the director. Who's your AD, your rec superintendent, and your parks superintendent?
Oh my gosh.
It's a really fun question.
It is. It's a tough
It is
one.
a good question. I wish I had time to prepare for that one. So again, my travels in the Parks and Recreation world are very Texas centric. So I will say that they're going to be Texas folks. I think, oh geez, putting people into positions is tough.
Tough.
Yep. I think my my all-star crew. Oh geez, I hope none of them listen, or none of the people I'm leaving off listen.
No one listens. You don't have to worry about it.
I've always okay. All right, good. Yeah, my wife won't be that offended. She'll be the only one listening to this episode. I think I would start. My AD would probably be Kevin Brown. He's the director in Katy, Texas. We've worked together, known each other for basically the entire time I've been in it, and we've always just gotten along really well. I really love the time I spend with him. I think he's one of those legacy Parks and Rec professionals. So he's got some of that ingrained, and then he's got some thoughts of his own, and he does a really good job of that. It has to be outside of Pflugerville.
Because you can't have worked with them.
Oh gosh, okay. Because I was going to take Jonathan Hansen anywhere I go.
Yeah.
When Shane stole Jonathan from me when I was in Harker Heights, that was one of the sadder days I've had as a Parks and Rec professional.
I feel like Shane's putting too many restrictions on this answer.
I feel like
you want his all-star team.
I'm taking Jonathan. Sorry, Shane. I'm building my department with Jonathan. You're losing him.
Who's your park guy?
I always am reaching out to Tim Spire. He's Travis County Parks in the Austin area. He is just a wealth of knowledge. That dude knows everything about managing a park. And Travis County does it all. They do nature parks, green belts, athletic facilities. He's top notch. So if I could pull him away from Travis County, he's going with me.
Awesome. I'm going to ask Tom and Jay the same question.
Right now?
Yep. Look at the silence.
Wow.
Can't have worked with them. No outs for y'all. Y'all have got a national
Oh,
network.
Okay, well, I am going to absolutely take Diana, formerly Diana Weber.
Okay.
yeah, she's a great one.
She was easily one of the most bright and just up and coming rock stars in our area who went to Mecklenburg County. Gosh, had to be 5 or so years ago at this point now.
Yeah.
So she's definitely be one.
What's role?
We'll put her as the AD.
Okay. Who's your
We'll-
AD, Jay? We'll do this back and forth. Who's your AD, Jay?
Oh, okay. You know what? Just for fun, because you said this earlier, you are my AD.
Oh, look at that. Oh,
And I'm saying it for multiple reasons. Okay.
Sure.
So number one, as much as there's a lot of banter back and forth, I think the outcome that would come from that would be incredible.
Yeah.
Number two, the different perspective that you would bring to the table from my perspective would be also incredible. And number three,
You get to
I
boss
don't
me
know that
around.
what's that?
Number 3, you get to boss me around.
100%. It would be really cool to get to fire you.
Yeah, for sure. Every Friday.
One of those
Okay.
shirt designs would certainly force it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What are the other two positions? Park
Rec
ops and
ops,
So-
park ops.
So I would, this is where, and Jeff said this, I don't want to leave anybody out, but especially, when we talk about our YPN fam, they're all so talented. I would definitely bring Nate Williams on in some kind of capacity.
Dude is super
and-
creative.
Oh, I lack the, I'm not in my working geniuses, right? The I and W are not necessarily my highest, right? And so, yeah, Nate's definitely
You're a rec guy.
Yeah, and he could do a lot though with facilities too, right? Like so Nate I would put him up in that list.
All right, Jay, who do you got for your rec guy or gal?
Man, I hope Hannah can cut out a lot of this dead air.
Yeah, she'll cut the dead air.
I'm embarrassed. I'm trying to think of the name right now because I was at a conference and it was another state conference in Missouri, and Michael Biedenstein introduced me to this person, and I do not remember his name. So, shoot.
Nate's in Missouri. Just still Nate.
It wasn't Nate. Hannah's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
This is the hardest
You know
question
what?
I've ever been asked.
Take it back. Okay. If my program person, and I mentioned this person earlier, would be Nathan Fort, because the creativity I've heard from him and the things I know he's done and his overall passion and his ability to get the public and staff to understand how important it is what we do, he would be phenomenal at that.
Okay, now you're parks person.
This one's an easy one for me. I mean, of course, I had time to think, a little bit of time to think, and Jay, you sparked me a little bit when you said Nathan Ford, but I would want someone who's got a real good background, but can also go out and, in addition to manage people, go out and get us money to enhance those facilities and, do whatever we need to do to accomplish the goals of the park system. And Kathy Caps,
Yeah.
she can do a lot.
Yeah, Kathy's done some amazing things with parks, and I'm gonna actually stick to the agency she came from, and Ken Hisler in Raleigh.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of conversations about parks, and he's actually over programming, so it's not his wheelhouse potentially, but I know he's got a ton of knowledge on that, and he's done some really cool things. And I would actually, now that I'm thinking of Raleigh, Stephen Bentley has done some incredible things from the park side. So, tag team and one of those two guys would be amazing from the park side.
Nate obviously would be an individual that falls into this category. You also don't want to demote someone, right? So demoting Shane is fine. That's, putting him in as your AD. But
He wants to be. He said it.
Yes, he does.
so
He
bad.
does. I get it. But I also would want to go and say, you know what? I need Stephen Bentley as my. So no offense to anybody on this.
You're not
but-
bringing in Noons as your park superintendent? Is that what you're saying?
Well, he already said no, right? He's not
Right,
going.
he did. He
He's
did.
not working down.
Can I flip this on its? I actually probably want to hear Shane's, but can I flip this on its head and bring up every time these questions come up, I think about my worst interview moment that I've ever had. And so maybe it's a 2-part question that can go around. But the question I got in an interview when I was in college interviewing with a sports team, did not get this job, of course, was what movie represents your life? And to give you a few seconds, I had watched The Shawshank Redemption the night before this interview and could not get another movie in my head. And I'm sitting there for at least 45 seconds thinking, just think of another movie. Just think of another movie. And eventually answered The Shawshank Redemption and tried to justify why that movie represented my life.
That's hilarious.
Needless to say, the interview ended after that question and I didn't get that job.
That's
awesome.
But maybe the better question is, what's the worst interview experience than what movie represents your life?
That's awesome.
I can talk. So the movie that represents my life, Top Gun. Yeah, I definitely like the idea of The Intern for some of the reasons that I'd love to see.
Sure.
Robert De Niro was married to a teacher. Obviously, I don't want to outlive Hannah. That would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. But like, if that, I could see in some ways that some of the things his character went through, I would be interested in. I also like This Is Where I Leave You. And I think at times families are dysfunctional, and that family sometimes reminds me of my family. Worst interview moment, I called myself a pecker in the interview one time.
Wow. That actual word, you used the word pecker?
Yeah, but I meant it because they asked about my computer skills.
I'm a pecker.
And I did the thing where I said I'm a pecker, and I was looking down, and when I looked up, the whole group was laughing at me, and I was like, well, damn. I did get that job, actually. So in fact, they called, offered me the job, and I was working out, and I said, you're going to give me the job when I called myself a pecker in the interview? And the guy, my first ever full-time boss, Ronnie, said, I'm giving you the job because you called yourself a pecker in the interview. So I want to work with you so bad. So, maybe not every Shawshank is bad. Maybe you get lucky sometimes.
I didn't.
Jeff, what does it look like when you get away from Parks and Rec? How do you relax? What do you do? What does it look like?
For me, it is, and this kind of became famous apparently at the Traps conference this past year, because I mentioned it and then it got mentioned in a session. But I have a group of 15 guys. I can't pretend to be the best golfer in the world, but I have a good group of 15 guys that we get together once a month. We do what's called the Midlife Cup. And we have this, we've done it for 5 years. We have this tournament format that it's just a whole thing. And so I knew 3 or 4 of those guys before starting that group. Now all 15 are good friends, go play golf pretty often with them outside of this. And so I think anytime I have some time away, that's not with my family. So my wife and my son are obviously the number one answer to that. But anytime there's some time that we can all get away from that, it's going and shooting a 120 somewhere.
I love it. That's me on.
I would love to.
10 holes.
Have you ever played with Shane? I want to see Shane on a golf course.
No, that'll be one of my goals.
Do you play golf, Shane?
Only in self-defense. Like twice a year, you get invited and you go play, and it's 15 holes too long. Like the first 3 holes, I'm having fun, and then I'm terrible. It's hot. I'm losing balls left and right, and I'm an asshole for the next 2 hours. Not that that's a shock.
Yeah, it's not always the most relaxing thing. It's more about being mad at something else.
But I love Topgolf. Topgolf's great.
So Topgolf, we have a booked plan to go with Johnny O. Skinner in Atlanta.
He loves Topgolf.
He is obsessed with it.
When you say we, you mean us or you and other people?
No, we're going. You know how last year at conference, Ryan Hennigress planned that outing.
Yep.
Yeah,
to plan an outing for a group, whoever wants to come.
Awesome.
And Jonathan's going to lead that charge.
And y'all said
cool.
my rec superintendent. So Jeff said something. Mine is Kate would be my AD, Kate Meacham. I have a huge respect for Kate and Alan. Ryan Hennigress would be my rec superintendent, and then Finsey. I don't know if y'all know him very well, but he's now the assistant director in Southlake, but had been in Denton and Highland Village. Finsey would be my park superintendent.
Those are good ones.
Well, Jeff, man, thanks for being on this call. This has been great. Probably one of our longest podcasts we've had.
Sorry.
We'll see what Hannah cuts down.
No, it was great.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, had a great time, Jeff. Thanks for making
having
the time.
me.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.
So that was fun. and real fun. Great conversation. You know, the funny thing about that is I don't talk about RecLess very often. This goes back to the first question you asked, Shane, but you know, do you really try to expose your whatever national, state, local presence to other professionals? Do you try to expose that internally? And I always don't. I think we've talked about this. I kind of just I want to do that, but I don't necessarily want that to be crept into my own organization all the time. So anyway, I had a meeting with our USTA rep today, and what came up was, hey, what do we want to talk with the local parks committee, tennis parks committee? You know, so it's basically a committee that's looking to get tennis in the parks, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, you know, what are some items maybe you would be interested in sharing? I said, you know, we had Jody Adams on this podcast and we talked about it, and he was just so intrigued by it, right? So from a USTA perspective, so I'm actually really excited to share that.
That's cool.
But while we were having that conversation, he goes, have you had him on yet? And he pointed to my assistant director.
Oh, really?
Yes, crazy timing that you had yours. Well, now I can't have him on.
Yeah, that's funny. No, I thought I knew I was bringing Jeff on, and I was trying to figure out a way to highlight him without y'all guessing immediately. But I've been a big fan of Jeff for a while, and I can say, and anyone who's reached out to me, he's as advertised. He's top shelf. He's amazing. I think he's great succession planning for me as well. Like it provides me the opportunity to think not only about big picture in Pflugerville, but big picture in my career, and that I can step away in a year or two and know that Pflugerville's fine and will continue moving. So Jeff checked a lot of boxes for me. We were excited to have him.
I was going to joke that when he was asked or talking about making that switch, I was like, well, and you know, Shane's going to be leaving pretty soon anyway.
I'm going to get fired anytime now.
Yeah. Guys, I had a good time as always, Shane. Great concept, bringing Jeff in.
Awesome, guys.
This was
y'all.
awesome. It's been good getting to know him a little bit more.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Definitely worth getting to know. All right, guys.
Okay, see you.